Okay, welcome back, everybody. This is the Caribbean Business Review. My name is Joseph Cox. Today, as we enter into our interview segment, we are so pleased to welcome Stephanie Murdock, who is the Chief Human Resource Officer at Barita Financial Group Limited. And Stephanie, of course, is such an expert in this area that one decided that I really had to just pick an area that really should resonate with all of us as people who either own businesses, aspire to owning businesses, entrepreneurs, or persons, frankly speaking, who just work with businesses. And this is how we are going to be looking at this conversation today, because we're looking at rethinking performance management in a changing workforce. Now, Stephanie, as I welcome you to the program, the question, really what comes to my mind is, we have been doing these performance management strategies, if you will,
Yes.
forever. But at the same time, one of the things that has confronted us as a country, and in Jamaica, and as a region, is low productivity. So clearly, our measurement strategies are flawed and perhaps impatient of reform. How do you treat with that sort of conversation?
Well, Josie, first of all, thank you for having me on the program. I'm very excited to talk about performance management and basically what I see as the evolution of the area from when even I started working about 20 years ago. And you raised some critical issues about productivity in the region, and has performance management really failed as in terms of how we administer. Joseph, when I started working, my performance management framework was a mini booklet. It looked something like, I don't know if persons remember, like an English CXE booklet. It had about 5 pages, and we captured such critical skills like punctuality. And, I would have received ratings like A or B, C, whatever. And when you look back, how on earth would that have been relevant to capturing my productivity on the job? So whether I came to work early, that's what they were looking at. The inability to have any kind of conversation about my work experience, it was just kind of slapping a grade on a piece of paper. It was not reflective of being very serious about productivity and where we're going and really how I was performing. Fast forward to 2025, and the landscape has changed because it's a different workforce, Joseph. You're talking about the millennials, you're talking about the Gen Zs, and we continue to be faced with chronic issues like productivity, low workforce morale, labor relations landscape that is just so dated and archaic. We're looking at laws that were implemented in the 1970s. What is so critical now is, how do you capture performance within a changing workforce and make it relevant to capture key economic outputs, not just for the business, for the country. So as a entity, you have to be very, very serious about performance management, realizing that what was administered to me is not relevant to today's dispensation.
No, I hear you on that, and I do agree. And therefore, the issue really, I would think, is, do we need to functional transition from what we used to have as an annual performance appraisal? Some companies do it every 6 months. Do we need to just basically scrap all of that and deal with something that is continuous? So continuous, because you see, when I come at you after 6 months or a year, and I say, oh, well, you need to improve in that area, to me, that introduces a lag, a productivity lag that you could have probably treated with initially. So I am looking at it from day one. So is it a case that you need continuous monitoring with perhaps performance improvement plans if needed, additional mentoring, coaching? How do you see that entire dynamic evolving in today's workplace?
I still believe there is a role for a more formal assessment at the end of the year.
Mhm.
And for want of a better word, a mid-year, assessment as well. But what works, Joseph, and I have irrefutable data to tell you that it does, is the continuous assessment from the beginning of the employee's life cycle with the company. So from day one, there has to be a kind of, you know, continuous communication between the team lead, the employee. You have your monthly check-ins, sometimes weekly, depending on the nature of the job. Because I mean, if you're in sales, if you're in something that's revenue generating, you certainly don't want there to be a passage of time before you are having a conversation with the teams. But it has to be where feedback is live.
Yes.
So, waiting until 6 months to say, well, Steph, it's not happening. You have not been doing a good job. You're looking at 6 months of wasted productivity, missed targets, the
Precisely.
passage of time where my performance has not been optimum, where the business performance, based on what you hired me for, has not been optimum. How are we serving either the individual or the company in that respect? And you have to realize as well, Joseph, that you see these young people, they want feedback now. It's a generation where they want to feel valued, they want to feel like there's purpose. They want to feel like they're making a contribution to whatever it is that they're doing. And without that feedback, then you'll find that you're going to continue to have high attrition rates if that's a problem that you're facing with as a business, and low productivity. You're not capturing the performance in a way that resonates with them. You have to be having the conversations very often.
But then, for too many of our companies in the Caribbean, I mean,
Mhm.
I would also have extensive experience with these things too.
Mhm.
We are seeing a scenario where training is treated like advertising. It's something that you do at the last if you don't have
Mhm.
absolutely any option at all at all. It's relegated to the bottom of the pile. But nowadays, and I call it particularly in the post-COVID new
Mhm.
normal, you have to have greater emphasis on reskilling and upskilling, as the case may be, because the nature of jobs is evolving so quickly.
Mhm.
But I don't get the sense, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't get the sense that many companies are even seized of this argument, much less operationalizing any changes to treat with it.
You are not wrong, Joseph. And, I'm embarrassed to say that there are many of my colleagues within the region that still subscribe to a rather dated way of looking just at development of your human capital, and how you manage that and retain that. Post COVID, when we reflect, we would have realized, at least from the HR function, that there was a lot of missteps on our part. For many HR professionals, we have done things by rote. Remember, I came up in a generation where HR professionals don't know maths. And so it was really personnel management. So you're not really trained to think outside the box. You're not looking at people risk as business risk. You're not looking at development of an employee as really a retention strategy. And what post-COVID has shown us is that it's a new way of thinking, not just for HR, but it's a new way of thinking for employees. They want different things and they are demanding different things from the organization. So gone are the days when you're presenting a strategic budget from a people
Mhm.
perspective and the first thing that they cut is training. Anytime you look like your expense getting out of control, and you're doing
That's
the
it.
balance with revenue, let's cut training. Let's
Yep.
let's take a 10 million off training.
Every time.
We don't need that. No, the staff members are telling us that they need that, and the business environment is saying that we need that. You have AI, machine learning, things like critical thinking, problem solving. When you do interviews now, I certainly not asking boring questions. So tell me about yourself and tell me about, some experiences that you've had. Can you think critically? Can you solve problems?
Yep.
Are you curious? What's the level of analysis that you will bring
Yep.
to the job. And whenever we see gaps of this nature, if this is an individual that you want to continue working with in the organization, you have to look at ways that you can
Yeah.
reskill, because with the landscape as it is now, and we're competing with machines,
No, indeed,
you
indeed.
best believe that your competitive advantage will be your people.
No, indeed. And therefore, when you're looking at that sort of scenario,
Hmm.
how do you, what role does one emotional intelligence actually bring to that table? Because
Hmm.
honestly, in my own experience, I find that that's an area that people really need to bone up on, to be honest with you. But the other part of it is in terms of the overall retention strategy and
Hmm.
retention, the importance of retention within the companies. I mean, there's this age-old argument, oh, people don't leave bad companies, they leave bad supervisors or whatever it is, or bad jobs, they leave bad supervisors.
Hmm.
I don't know, because you also have another aspect of it, which is known as company culture.
Hmm.
I have worked in spaces that are so toxic that, honest to God, when you come out of it, when you leave it, it's like, oh God, a weight has lifted my shoulder, and
No,
that's the end of
no,
it.
it
So,
is. Joseph, I have spoken to individuals, who, when they have left some companies, they will talk to you about experiencing PTSD. And we laugh, and we're saying it very tongue in cheek, but some company cultures can be sufficiently so toxic that it's like a weight off your shoulder when you exit. But before we even get to that, I love the fact that you raised emotional intelligence,
right.
because a few years ago it was one of those kind of fluffy, ambiguous words. What does emotional intelligence even mean? And I can tell you, Joseph, that with AI making an expert out of many of us in many areas, when we do interviews now, the areas that we focus on are not necessarily the technical mastery of a particular area. We're looking at the softer skills. The softer skills have now become even more important than the hard skills. And
Yeah.
I'm going to say something a little controversial, that some of the issues that female leaders have been wrapped on, given a bad rap about being too emotional or using their gut, discernment. Studies are now showing that boards with female members tend to make better decisions. And that is because, yeah, that we're going into a whole other
Yeah.
discussion there, but we're talking about the importance now of emotional intelligence and being able to recognize your blind spots,
Mhm.
being able to do the self reflection, being able to have a level of empathy, and understanding for situations and circumstances around you. These are issues that are key drivers when we now talk about good leadership. And good leadership is what we are looking for, because we make an assumption at a particular level that you have technical mastery. Yeah? What we want to see is how you're going to lead. And to be a good leader, you have to have some level of control over your emotions and understand how your emotions affect how you deliver on a particular job. And therefore, I do not necessarily subscribe to people don't leave companies, people leave bad leaders. People leave toxic cultures, which is a mixture of the leadership
Thank
and
you.
the business in and of itself.
Thank you.
All right. So I may be working with a leader that is, mediocre, but I enjoy the company. So I'm going to look and see, are there any other career opportunities within the same company? Because this is my happy place.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm not going
Yeah.
to rush to leave because of one person if there are other opportunities for growth. But people are leaving, especially, your millennials and your Gen Zs, because of what the company stands for,
Mhm.
what the leaders stand for. And it's just not a good cultural fit for them
Right.
where they are
Right.
in their life right now.
Right, because you have scenarios where, because I mean, the toxicity is one aspect of it,
Hmm.
but you have scenarios whereby in some companies the person is end up doubling, tripling up. They're
Mhm.
overworked and overstressed. So
Mhm.
I always say this thing to my staff and my team. Everything can't be a crisis. And you can't be stretched 100% of the
Yeah.
time. and everything. It does make sense. They are human beings. So
Yes.
you have to prioritize and you have to recognize it, because if everything is a crisis and everything is an emergency, then nothing is an emergency or a crisis.
Mhm.
So you
Mhm.
have to be very clear. But then the other aspect of it, Stephanie, that struck me particularly with the younger group, the millennials, etc., is that, for example, when I started working, it would be if you change a job every year or every 2 years, it was frowned upon. You're seen as being unstable,
Mhm.
etc., etc. But nowadays, among that particular age group, that cohort, as it were,
Mhm.
that is the norm. I mean,
It
they're
is.
moving because of income, they're moving because of upward
Mhm.
mobility, etc., etc. They're moving. So I don't know. And this thing about company loyalty, whereas that has its place, I'm not sure that is really pride of place anymore.
No.
I mean, people, they're not going to sabotage an entity, but I don't know that is any longer the one of the important metrics to guide decisions.
No, no. I mean, in HR, there are some very basic metrics that we still look at, so we look at the retention rate
Mm-hmm.
because it is important in terms of the organizational health if you have a very high staff turnover. But there is some element of attrition that's healthy because a couple years ago, when I'm looking at a resume, as you said, if I see someone leaving somewhere after 3, 4 years, I'm like, ugh, this person can't keep a job. But now you find that the average tenure is maybe 5 years for someone 35 and under. And that's because they want different things. And sometimes it's not necessarily because they're unhappy with the company. It's just that they have set different goals for themselves. And if they feel that they have outgrown a particular situation, a particular environment, they're going to move on. Now, what does that mean though when we talk about transfer of knowledge and sustainability of the business if you're losing your good talent, every 3 to 4 years? I try not to look at it as a negative when I have a high performer who has decided to leave the company after 5 years. I'm not happy. And, as a business, we're going to try and retain. But what I will tell you, in those 5 years, we're going to try and invest in the talent and get as much as we can from
Yeah.
the person for the period of time. Because we recognize that if we have raw talent, high performing talent, they're going to be competitive on the market. And sometimes it's not a function of a failure of our retention strategies. Sometimes it's really just a time for them to move on. Yeah.
No, I hear you. I hear you on that. But then, you see, this is also one of the conversations and one of the arguments put forward to defend trying to gut the training budget. That what is the point of investing in these people if they're going to be transitioning within a very short period of time? Will you get the requisite return on investment? So it becomes a very circuitous
And
conversation.
it's very frustrating, Joseph, because what I want to point out to the powers that be is that the individual is here now,
Right.
and we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. And what this individual is demanding is key development opportunities, career mapping opportunities, value added work, creating a space that allows him or her to shine. Yes, there is the risk that after 5 years, 6 years, the individual will go. But do we really have the right to hang on to anyone for 10, 11, 12 years, like in the 90s, and say, well, if you leave, you're not loyal?
Yeah. No.
Sometimes people leave for better things.
Of course. Of course. Of course.
Yes.
Of course.
And my thing is, when I have you, Joseph, I'm gonna train you.
Mhm.
If you are performing and you are delivering as you should in your job.
No, it makes sense. And the other aspect of it, no, is that in all of this, I think the management frame is a
Mhm.
critical component. Let me guide you where I'm going with this.
Mhm.
in some companies you have hierarchical structures. Some have democratic structures. Some of them you have what
Mm-hmm.
we call visionary structures.
Yes.
And some of them, to be honest with you, like I tend to be one of those that do the kind of hybrid approach, whereby what I treat the organization almost like it's flat, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the sense that I then develop basically what would be like an intra-company think tank among the team members. So in other words, all ideas contend. I mean, obviously you're the leader, so ultimately, you have to take the decision,
Mm-hmm.
but all ideas contend. And I find that when I have done that, I've gotten, frankly, the most out of people. I mean, obviously I have to use a lot of emotional intelligence because whereas that works among some of the more senior team members, you have to ensure that the more junior staff don't feel left out, or you understand, that type of thing. But I have found that that works. But I don't know what, from your experience, you have far more experience in these things than I do. What does today's workforce look for? They look for the old-fashioned hierarchical thing on the micromanagement. They look for the democratic thing. What they look for?
They look for leadership they look for leadership through influence, not authority. That's
Mm-hmm.
exactly what they look for. I think that's the best way I can say it. It's not about positions. It's about how you influence and how you lead. So what I get from what you're saying is that you have really pushed a culture of stripping away the titles, so to speak. So it's not okay because you're a junior or you're a senior. You've stripped that away and you've pushed a kind of collaborative teamwork environment where
Exactly.
cross-functional teams can come together and they can innovate and they can collaborate and they can ideate, whether it's a hybrid or a co-locating circumstance. What you find is that the new workforce likes that, Joseph. That works. And I'm not surprised that you have seen significant results in a positive way and that you've moved the needle, probably in terms of even engagement. If you do like a pop quiz, I mean, a spot on, checkpoint, because the focus on titles, the focus on I am the boss. So therefore, it's my decision. Doesn't work. Yes, Joseph, we all have to have a boss.
Mhm.
And sometimes, yes, everyone cannot be a part of the decision making, but that does not mean that we do not create a space for persons to be able to share their ideas and at least feel that they are a part of what we are going to do to move the business forward. And that's really what I like about where I'm working now, because it's a younger demographic. It's our fairly young leadership team. And a lot of how we manage is through cross-functional,
Mhm.
innovative platforms. We use a lot of digital tools. So whether it's Sleek Form or Slack or Jira in our teams, we have like an AI council. We're always trying to think outside the box to generate that level of engagement amongst all persons. So we're not focusing on I'm the chief of HR and you're the this. No, we're really working towards a common purpose, and that we've seen some really good results in terms of moving the needle on engagement and fairly steady attrition rates.
No,
So
well, I
even though
mean,
on one hand I'm saying that, it's okay if you're a high performer and you want to leave, but luckily we don't have many of them leaving right
yeah,
now.
yeah, 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 yeah. No, man, I get you on that, and suppose then it strikes me. I have to raise this because
Hmm.
coming out of the COVID experience, one of the problems I was having, I must confess, is I found myself pushing back against a really archaic frame in the sense of you had a lot of persons who were saying, oh, the people need to come back into the office. And I keep saying, but we functioned, we actually got more out of the team when the people were working remotely and checked in, every couple
Hmm.
of days, so to speak, versus them being sitting down here just to say you're sitting down in an office. I don't get it. But Stephanie, I don't know. Perhaps you have a different perspective than I do. But the truth of it, I do not get what has been the resistance to the remote working, because it is something that it was proven to have worked.
You know, Joseph, we're going very controversial now because there are some companies that they're adamant that it has to be 5 days a week. And there are some companies where, no, you don't need to come in at all. For me personally, I do tend to work better within the office. So you
Okay.
find that I pretty much every day, but I have flexible hours. So it works for me. So I may come in at 7 o'clock in the morning, I may come in midday. A lot depends on what the schedule is like for the day. But we do push a hybrid environment. And I can tell the listeners that forget the data for a minute. Forget what the persons who say you have to work 5 days a week, and any organization that affords a level of flexibility, you must have a competitive advantage in the workplace, because what COVID has shown us is that persons want the flexibility.
Well,
So sometimes it's not necessarily the flexibility of being able to work from home. Sometimes it's the flexibility of your hours, right? So a flexible organizational culture when it comes to how we work is always going to give you a competitive advantage. And what I will tell you is that what COVID has taught us is that having me come into the office and just kind of hovering to make sure I'm doing the work is nonsense. As
yeah,
leaders, we need to start focusing on the output.
yeah,
So whether you
absolutely.
do it at 4 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, are you giving me what I need to give? I don't have to be at my desk to do it.
No, absolutely. And therefore, I mean, because we have to wrap this up now, but as we look to leave this conversation, Stephanie, in the next, your best guess, in the next
Mhm.
5 years, where do you see the human resources, how should I call it, framework? How do you see it evolving further?
In the next 5 years, I feel that it won't just be, talking about HR having a seat at the table. I think it will be key and mandatory to the success of any business where the HR function is seen as important as any other revenue generating functions, because the labor landscape has changed. The workforce has changed in terms of the demographic. We're getting younger. Persons who are going into the work world. And we are now competing with machine learning. We're now competing with digital transformation. We're now competing with AI. In the next 5 years, the workforce will look different, and you will need to make sure that your people agenda is current and relevant to deal with all of these competing issues. Because at the end of the day, machines can't do certain things. You're going to need your people. And the kind of skills that you're going to want your people to have are not skills that probably I would have focused on when I was coming into the work world. There are different type of skills. So how we recruit will be different. How we treat will be different. The kind of questions that we ask on interviews will be different. How we manage performance will be different. So it's an exciting time. It's an exciting time for the profession. And my only prayer is that the region will be ready to capitalize on, I think, some of the changes that we will see in the next 3 to 5 years in terms of how we manage human capital in
All right, Stephanie Murdock, thank you very much. Chief Human Resources Officer at Barita Financial Group Limited. Stephanie, I got it right.
Yes, you
Thank you
did.
very
Thank
thank you very
you.
much.
You're